Wonderful. Okay. So I'm going to go back and share my screen again. Okay. So as I mentioned, negative space up here, when we're looking like, can we get this above the fold? And can we be a little bit more intentional with the negative space? And then also your typography, I think, needs to be a little bit bolder. Not necessarily bold, but it can't be light like this. You're going to lose a lot and people are not going to be able to read it. Okay. Passionate, calm, brand voice, brand attributes, sustainable. Okay, these are the marks, logo and typeface. Yeah, and if you're trying to be thoughtful with your negative space, right? Like, let's look at it this way. This is just a big wall of text. Or it's not a huge wall, but it's a big chunk of text, right? I almost lose the fact that this is attributed to these images. So why not have it here, or why not have it on this left side,
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with this as well. I honestly think, like, I'm sure these are 3 separate image assets, but could you put them all in a square and have them divided, just in one image assets, then make sure that this is attributed, like people are reading this stuff and understanding as you go, right? Like, you want to tell the story as you're scrolling. And I think it's kind of hard because, again, we have this like negative space, then you have like, there's really no break. So I'm kind of like already looking at this and being like, oh, these are just all images that have like the same thing to do with each other, but they don't. You're trying to talk about logo and typeface, you're trying to talk about brand strategy. And I think, when you have these chunks, if you have these sections together, it's going to be kind of confusing as you're going through them. Another note on typography as we're doing this, because your images are big, I think your typography needs to get bigger as well.
Okay.
This is additional brand assets. Okay. So, I mean, I think like this stuff feels repeated, right? Like, you just have kind of like reversing the color palette for these. I'm not sure if that's needed. And again, rather than having 3 images in a square, could you just do 4, kind of like this, right? Like this one side here, and that's 1 image.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. And like, as you're seeing here, you actually have 2 blocks that are completely missing, right? 3D design and product rendering. Better than us. Anticipated directing the product shoot. After assessing things, I realized there would be a few conditions that would take away from the quality of the shoot. So I think in your phrasing, and I haven't read all of these, let's just look at this. The logo establishes brand recognizability and reinforces the moisturizing attribute of the products. A new logo can be used alone, brand initial, or included with the brand logo type. Okay, a few things. When we're talking about the logo, right? The logo establishes recognizability and reinforces the moisturizing attribute of the products. The logo can be used alone with the brand's initial or included with the brand logo type. Brand using 2 typefaces, one in script and the other in serif. I audited this against typefaces of other cosmetic brands. Okay. So I get where you're trying to kind of like detail a bit, like, yeah, the client didn't agree. We had different ideas and we've kind of met in the middle. And I think you need to take another kind of like swipe at some of these, right? Like, if that's the case, right? Your client wanted something that is done a lot in the market, right? Using a script typeface and then using a serif, right? That's overdone. And I'm sure we've seen a lot of it, right? And that's where you were disagreeing. You proposed something else, and through analyzing the market and analyzing competitors, you found an opportunity to stand out by using something that isn't overused already, right? Or that isn't generic or normal within this kind of industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think like really trying to simplify some of what you've written here, and also I think like how you want to frame it is really important as well, without making the typography too stylized. My client and I reach a compromise. I mean, from a design perspective, this is a sans serif word mark, right? Pretty straightforward. But again, I think the more important thing here is your decision to present to the client that yes, you may want a script in a serif because you see a lot of other brands doing that, but your brand is different, right? Like that's the value there. That's the value in your exchange, right? Is doing something that doesn't follow the norm, but makes sense for the brand and makes sense for the company, right? So you want to like be really clear about that. And I think you should kind of think about what was like what is the
most important like bit from this?
Most important bit. Yeah, exactly. The phrasing kind of escapes me right now, but like just in those 3 paragraphs, we just made one sentence that kind of summarizes everything you put there, right? If you want to get into detail, I'm like, again, thinking about like your market or who you're talking to, right? And this is why I asked that question before of like freelance or full-time. Um, I think it's interesting. It's fine to include details of like typeface, it's avant-garde, great. And perhaps it's better to talk about like, yeah, we selected one typeface that we thought was really clear and really contemporary for this product. And instead of incorporating another one, which may overcomplicate it because the client, is going to be handling this stuff on their own, we just decided that they would use separate weights, in order to make that process really easy.
Okay.
And so I think, again, like that's really important as well. When we get down to here, and this is where that like interdisciplinary kind of comes in, what I mentioned, right? Like at the end of the day, depending on who you're talking to, whether it's an agency or a client, I don't think that it's super important to mention like, yeah, I then started to work in Blender, and
Okay.
I can do 3D stuff. I mean, it's a question to you of like, who are you talking to, and is it important for them to know that, right? Is a client going to know what Blender is? Maybe. I would err more side on the not. Is an agency? Sure. But, if an agency is looking for a graphic designer, Blender is not going to be a skill that they're necessarily looking for, but you can mention it and say to them, hey, like I've also worked in 3D before. I know that's a lot of like, I know you guys do a lot of work with that. And that's when it'll show through. But again, at the end of the day, like how you got these things done is not like the tools you use is not necessarily important. It's how and why. So, I think you have a little bit of that here where it's like, and I don't like this phrasing of like, I anticipated directing a product shoot. It's like the brand needed to have really good product photography. And so we worked together to come up with the best possible solution for that. Instead of using rendering, or instead of using photography or something, whatever, we rendered them in using the brand color with their new labels, or I even think that might even be too much. All of this is to say, right, like as I'm going through some of these bits and pieces of text, I'm not saying take all this stuff out, like, and just only have a sentence that says that. I think what I see too often is too many designers don't include enough information. But I do think, again, you need to go through what we just mentioned of like, what is the most important part of this? Well, they didn't have any product photography. So, and I don't have the resources to do a whole studio photo shoot. So instead, I did 3D renders that look just as good, right? Like that's the kind of like point, and now they're able to use these on their social media, on their marketing channels and things like that. Like that's like the big seller right there. Instagram management. So I think okay, and so this is it. So Instagram management. What is this? Can you explain to me what this is?
So my thought process behind adding that was just to show, because like I guess I after like hearing your feedback, I guess I was more so trying to like show marketable skills like that I often see in job postings. And so part of that was more so just like how like there's listings for like a social media designer, and that's really just someone who can like make graphics and just like posts and you know establish like the strategy for that. So that's where that was coming from.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I think Instagram management is the wrong label for this
Hmm.
because you're not posting per se, right? Like you're not creating posts, captions, hashtags, and things like that, are you?
Yeah, I am. I did like I did like the copy and stuff for them too. So, but
Okay.
that's another thing. Like this particular job, there was a lot. Like I did it all by myself. But I guess I like was struggling with and this also relates back to what you're saying as well. But I struggled with like because I would hear feedback from other like just designers and stuff, and they would often say that like they there's a need for like more in-depth information rather than just like being so I guess I struggle with being a bit too long-winded. Um, but yeah, like I don't know. I guess I don't I have an issue navigating like what is necessary and what isn't to add in. But with this job, I did a lot of work, like the copy, even on the website and like the product descriptions and stuff like that. So I just don't know like what.
Um, okay, so then I think we've kind of hit a point where we're kind of, I mean, we're going through this already. Like I mentioned this with the like renderings, right? And the product shots, right? Like
Mhm.
this is a section that needs to kind of like, to your point of like, what are my marketable skills? Because I think I think there's this, it goes back to that original question. I think there's a little bit of confusion of like, what are you trying to do, right? And yes, if you are trying to go freelance, it's great to have these sections that really illustrate all the services that you offer. And I also think, honestly, if that's the case, that should almost be like a page itself of like what it is you do, or it could
Okay.
be on your homepage that like people know immediately, right? Because what's going to happen, and quite frankly, this is what I believe is like most of the time, is that information is going to be on like an about or a homepage, and that's got to be clear. And then when people get into these projects, they want to see really good looking stuff. They want to see great work. They're going to read some of this stuff, absolutely. And I 100% enforce and reinforce that you still need to have really clear descriptions and copy, everything I just mentioned. But at the same time, this is almost too much and it's not exactly clear, right?
Okay.
If you guys, if you did social media for this brand, then, if I had to put this on my portfolio, I would say something like social marketing campaign. Very clearly, what that is, right? I worked with the brand to develop the voice for all of the captions and copy for all of these posts, as well as the imagery.
Okay.
That included X amount of posts per week, per month, whatever it may be. And that again is a little bit more clear than Instagram management. I think that's just like a, easy mistake of like, what is it going to be? What's going to ring really clearly to people when they're trying to hire you? Management almost, yeah. I guess from a
Yeah.
designer perspective, it's just like, it's like from a design perspective, are you a designer or are you like a social media manager? Like, so that's
Yeah.
that kind of confusing, but doesn't stop you from saying like, yeah, I can write copy. Like I love writing. So, and like I studied philosophy. So I have, really witty, point of perspective on things. And I think like, we were able to really develop a good voice for how the brand should sound on social media, right? Like that's there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But I think it is just being a little bit more clear and just being a little bit more to the point with some of these.
Okay.
Also, so I'll click on this website. You have, and then again, like, let me go back actually. Again, sort of short selling and my point of like how these sections are starting to kind of blur together almost. Like you have moments of like, okay, cool, negative space. Like if let's just do this. Let's see. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That it does that. Is this like normally how you would view your website, like within this sort of view,
No,
or
I have like different breakpoints like set up, like so it's
yeah.
responsive. So that might be.
No, totally. I just want to make sure because I'm on a really wide monitor. So I
Mhm.
just want to make sure like is it too wide right now? Is this out of the regular? But it's let's just say if I go here. Okay. So there's a little bit of negative space about here. But just from like a design perspective, right? Like this space and this space is equal. So I don't know which to attribute it to, right? Just like really
Okay.
quickly, you
Yeah.
know? And then the whole design of like the page starts to differ when I get to this section. And then it goes back to this section, right? And so when I get to the bottom here, I'm thinking like all of this is the same almost, you know, again, like if I'm someone that is quite, just dumb looking at stuff, I could easily think that this is all the same. So like website design, I'm missing that section, right? I'm
Mhm.
missing a whole like images about the website design and what the final thing is because you're asking people to kind of go to the site itself. That's fine, but again, I still think for portfolio reasons, you need to have images of the site, nice mock-ups, things like that.
Okay.
Let's go to the website. What did you build this on?
Wix, I think. Yeah. Or Editor X. That's what they asked.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think you need to have mocks of the site here.
Okay.
Um, So you did a lot of stuff for this.
Mhm.
Um, if you don't mind me asking, how much did you charge?
It was actually free. It was yeah. It was a volunteer
It's
project, and so yeah.
okay. Hey, listen, there's nothing wrong with that. I've done my fair share as well. But you now see how much work went into this, how much time you spent on this,
Mhm.
and you can give yourself an idea of like, okay, ideally, what would I like to be charging for something like this? Because essentially, what you're telling me is that you did the brand strategy, which in addition, I would think, like the way you've presented this work right now, it just all blurs together, right?
Okay.
But from what you're telling me, you've done brand strategy, you've done logo design, you've done, the brand identity, you've done product rendering and product photography, you've done social media marketing, and you've done web design. So these are 5 sections, clear, clear skills, things that you could get hired for separately in their own respects. But the way you've presented this work, everything looks just really like there's nothing jumping out at me that says like this is one thing that we did, this is another thing that we did, this is another thing we did, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I think that's like key when you're thinking about how to present these projects. It's like, okay, cool, if you want to start off with the brand strategy, editorialize that section,
Okay.
then move on to the next section, then move on to the brand identity, the social media, whatever it is, um so that's this project. You want to go through one more really quickly?
Yeah. You can go to that one, the cornucopia one. That's another like somewhat large one.
Okay, already you have another. Okay, you see why this navigation doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
But already you have like another template or design, page design going on here, right? This starts to work out a little bit better. And if you're trying to use that negative space in a way that makes sense, I like this one better than the last one. Same things apply here with the typography, making sure that it's legible.
Mhm.
But I think like already cool. Like, okay, cornucopia, branding, design, UI, UX. Awesome. Overview here. Clear. Awesome. Some images, research and approach. Cool. Look at that. I like this is starting to be a little bit more clear about what it is.
Mhm.
Let me just see here. What is this? Font size, 12 pixels. What happens if we make it lots really big? Not really big, but kind of big. So this is the section. Where's my other stuff here? Where's your other stuff? Okay, so you've done something. I'm guessing if this. Okay, yeah, Editor X has some really, they build in a really weird way.
Yeah,
So here,
I want to switch to a different web builder, but it just takes a while. So
yep, let's see if I move this around. That's the other thing I don't like. So imagine, right, if you're, I'll get out of here. Imagine if your section headings were a little bit more sizable like this. And if you're using 3 columns, you know, what's to say that like if we increase this size to no. Oh, come on. You're killing me. I'll just refresh the page. So let's go to here. Let's get this font size up to say 16. Oh no.
yeah, I have it in
This,
it's in like a rigid like grid system. So
yeah, I mean, usually you can go on and just like mess with the font sizes, like how I'm doing. But anyway, imagine if it was that bigger size and then this was bigger and this maybe took up 2 columns, right? It would kind of ask for attention, right? It would ask people to kind of stop and take notice and read a little bit. And that's the other thing I think is key when you're doing these projects, when you're doing your portfolio. It's like, what is going to make people stop and read and take the time to actually appreciate what you've done?
mhm,
Pain points, okay.
it's a sizing issue. I don't know why it's doing that.
Given. The other thing I'm noticing is that you have these moments where like images go, but then you have this set as a background image. I think that's pretty much what happens. And it doesn't scroll with you. If that's the case, if this is too big of an image, I don't like that. That me personally, I just don't like that. If this is an image that's too big for a square or it doesn't match these, find a different solution. Because I
It's
think
better
it's
to
either
take in
asked.
like, are you saying like it's better to take in like just as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, if this is a pattern, right? Show me the pattern. I'm not a. I just think it kind of throws off things, right? It's just like it's gonna just makes my eye just jump and question as to like why that is the case.
Okay.
And if I think about it more, it's like, well, probably because this image is too big and probably because this image has more to it. So if that's the case, make it easy for yourself. Make it a big image and make it work somehow, you know? Like if you developed a bunch of patterns for this brand, I want to see those. Or if you developed a lot of these, excuse me. Yeah.
Bless you.
If you developed a lot of these textures and these, you know, kind of like illustrations, I'm actually like kind of missing those a bit. You know, I get like one here, but I almost think that would be interesting.
Some of them are too large because that's like taking a while to load.
I have slower Wi-Fi, unfortunately. So, so the last project was branding, and this is kind of like getting into the digital space. Um, do you have a sense of like what it is that you'd ultimately like to be doing?
Um,
Like what if you had to freelance or if you had to go to a marketing agency
mhm.
or just, you know, off the top of your head, like what are the roles that you're applying to?
I'm applying to like digital design mostly, but those are like that's the thing. Like a lot of it varies depending on the company, and they all kind of like blend together as far as uh job duties. But ideally, I do like working with graphics and branding and like 3D. Like those are the 3 things that I'd like to do. And usually, like, or at least I try to go for stuff that like kind of has that in a package together. So
Mhm. Yeah, because I mean, what I see with designers sometimes is like they throw in a sort of like an app redesign. Now, can you tell me a little bit about this project? Was it client? Was it just like kind of, self-initiated?
I took a boot camp and that was one of the course projects. So
Okay, cool. Did you do any other projects in the boot camp?
yeah, there's two other ones, but I didn't think they were strong enough. I didn't want to keep like iterating on it. So
So, and what was the boot camp? Was it just like a UX boot camp?
yeah, it was with what was it? Like Av Academy, I think.
Okay. Um, quick design note. I I'm not a fan of having the text burned into the image here. And what happens is like now there's a stark contrast. So like instead of actually reading this stuff, I'm gonna read this stuff, which is fine. But if that's the case, if this gets smaller, that becomes harder to read. So consider
Yeah.
like making this an image and then breaking this out to be on the page, on the project page itself. Back to what I was saying before, there is not enough on your portfolio at the moment that makes me scream that screams like UX designer, which I don't think from what you just mentioned is exactly how like where you want to go. It's good that you've messed or, kind of like dived into that realm a bit to see like what it is you like about it. Immediately to me, this is more in the like kind of space of branding and illustration and styling the app. And I'm sure you did a lot of kind of like the traditional like work through of like, what's the problem? How do we identify the pain points? Things like that. Like,
Mhm.
let's get user flows together. But it can be it can be a little bit tough. Like there needs to be more of projects like these for that to happen. Now, what I think is good, because like you're saying, is like a digital designer is more so on the visual side. It's more so like working with stuff and not afraid to dive into things like apps and stuff like that. So that's great.
Mhm.
Um, I think you should consider, and this is a question to you, like, are you really enthusiastic about like some of this stuff about like putting wireframes together and this and that and mapping out experience? Or is your interest more in the side of, I want to like come up with the visual identity for some of these apps. I want to like work with that. And yes, like I'm familiar with coming up with these questions for user, experience and stuff like that. But, is that more like where would you kind of navigate to, or what are you more drawn to? Because once you have the answer to that question, I think it'll let you kind of really figure out, okay, going back to everything that we just talked about in the previous project, what are the things that I need to illustrate and have on the page here that let people know that this is what I do, right?
Okay.
And again, if you're going for like an agency, it's good to show that you have experience working on, working with a digital app, working with an iOS app or whatever it may be. But at the same time, what's getting a little confusing is that like you've come up with these elements, right? You've taken your time. And to me, again, after looking at that last project, like to me, it kind of comes off like this is what you're interested in. Is that fair to say, or would you disagree?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty fair to say. Yeah.
So I think like kind of thinking about that, and then okay, like thinking about it, digesting it a bit, and then reframing. Okay, what is it that I want to show with this project, or what are the skills or those kind of like qualities or tasks that I want to show within this project, whether that be for a client or an agency, right? Um, I think this image is getting cut off.
Hmm.
And then another note, just portfolio, like again, how we talked about already, this is starting to feel like a little bit better of a layout. Do yourself a favor, figure out one layout and use it for every page,
Okay. See,
you know?
yeah, okay. Straight away from that thinking that it need to be unique to the project, but okay.
I think
That's-
sure you could absolutely get to that point, but I think it's actually working against you. I think going to be wasting a lot more time trying to figure out a unique layout for each project right now. And I think what needs to be more emphasized is like getting the design to one, look right, be legible, and be legible across a ton of different devices, getting all the information in these sections and descriptions. Like that to me is the most important part, right? Like you could take the one thing I kind of even suggest to a lot of designers is like, let's just say that you had to put all of this information in a Google Doc, right? And you just had pages for each project, basically outlining the sections, right? Like we just talked about in that last project, like on that one page, you're going to have a section talking about the social media work that you did for that brand. On that, you're also going to have a section about the product photography. You're also going to have a section about the brand strategy. And if you couldn't really divide that page in half, right, because you're really given like strict guidelines within working in like a Google Doc or even like a Notion, then your focus then becomes on like, okay, cool. I want to make sure that everything I've written here is really good. I want to make sure it's really clear, and I want to make sure that the images make sense for whatever it is that I'm writing, right? So when you approach your portfolio, if you were to do that first, everything else becomes secondary, and everything else becomes a lot easier because you've taken the time to write all that stuff down. You've gone through to think about really like, what is it that I want to explain on this one page? And then all you have to do when you get to your Wix or whatever it may be is start to drop your images in. And sure, then you can get, creative with how you want to lay it out. But for right now, I wouldn't worry about you trying to make unique layouts for each project.
Okay.
I would think about getting all of that information really solid, setting a layout that works for all your projects and using that. All right. So I think those are the two projects we'll go through. Any questions or anything like that you want to kind of go over before we sign off?
I think we've addressed them. I wanna like marinate on it and see if there's anything I can think of. So I guess just like to sum everything up, make well, I guess also like as far as like the work goes itself, like what is that? Do you think that like I'm assessing myself as, I guess, maybe like a mid tier, like as far as like skill and experience level? Would you say that's like appropriate to?
When it comes to like looking for like
Just like the
roles,
quality and like the skill of the work that I have presented so far?
I would say this: quality of work is only going to get you so far. Quality of work, it does not come down to quality of work when you're applying for more experience or more higher level jobs. All the things that make you stand out at those points are your ability to work with clients, to mediate problems, to work with other team members, things like that.
Okay.
And so quality of work is great. I think you have good stuff, you have good taste, but that alone is not going to get you to what you're saying as like a mid-level designer. Unfortunately, like the way the job market is, and the way companies operate is they're going to look for that experience as, you've had other roles at other design roles within companies. And so, because again, like you can have great work, you can have shitty work, but if you're able to learn, if you're able to take instruction, if you're able to really collaborate with a team to ultimately get a project done or move that objective forward, that's going to give you the experience and what's going to really determine if you're like a mid-level or a senior level or whatever it may be.
Okay.
Unfortunately, like I don't want to say like a junior is a junior designer, but I've seen really young designers come out of school camps, taught themselves, that had really great work. I've seen people who have done complete like 360 career changes and have been amazed at the stuff that they do. And they have, they never worked in a design setting or kind of an agency setting before. And, unfortunately, like you're going to have to kind of go through that ladder a bit before you can say, oh, well, I'm a mid-level designer. Sure. I mean, you have like again, it's not the quality of work that starts to really separate you at that point. It is all the other things that go into design. I mean, granted, I've said this for years, my quality of work, my level of design has tapped out a while ago. Like I'm good with type, I'm good with color, and I'm good with composition. And yes, I learn new things every day. I learn new tools, mess around with Blender here and there, but that's not going to get me to the, being the head of a design department, or that's not going to get me the next senior level position. The last job I had, which was the lead of a product design team, I got that because I spent 8 years working for other different, companies and teams that allowed me to understand how do I get things done when I'm working with other teams that aren't designers, so like, so like the quality of work didn't matter after my first 5 years, the quality of work became actually like I was eventually doing less work, or less visual work and more, managing, coordinating, and working with other teams. That is all to say that's like within the realm of like, if you're applying for a full-time position, right? If you want to go freelance and you want to continue to just make great work and work with clients, then that's sort of a different story, right? Because the really only thing that you need to prove is that you can, one, get the job done, and two, that you have experience doing it before. That's kind of the same thing, but that you're gonna create something that makes sense for that brand, right? Like that's what you're proving at the end of the day when you're kind of like freelancing or going out with clients. So think about that. Like, yeah, the quality of work is great. You have good stuff, but also at the same time, make sure that you're going to get a role where you're going to learn a lot from.
Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate all of this. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna take that in consideration and like rework my strategy, I guess. Because I after like what you're telling me, and this is like after several rounds of redoing my portfolio over the past year, I think I've changed it up like 6 or 7 times. But yeah, I guess I'm learning more to like consolidate and be more concise and I guess communicate more what I'm doing, because I guess I look more unsure, and I think that also comes with being self-taught and kind of just trying to like navigate how best to land something. So yeah, I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with like, listen, own the fact that you taught yourself all of this stuff, right? And be really confident in that, because I think that says a lot about the person you are, right? And sure, there are designers who go to school. I went to school for design, and yeah, like that taught me. I went from painting to learning about design, right? You could do all of that. Everything that I've done, you can do, right? Like you don't have to like think of yourself as like lesser or anything like that. Like, I think it's pretty badass that you've been able to do this. You've been able to teach yourself things like Blender and create some good stuff. So be confident in that, like, that you can take on any challenge, because design is just about that. It is literally like, okay, can I actually do what they're asking me to do? Can I get it done? And can I get it done in a really nice, beautiful looking way?
Okay, cool. And I'm like just asking, like, is there a way that I would be able to like in the future, like check back in just to see, like, assess things, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have my email. You can always drop me a question. I will be sending out an email after this review. It's going to have a link to just fill out like 2 questions. And the faster that you can send that back to me, I'll be able to deliver all the notes from this recording, and then I'll send you the link to the recording. It won't be uploaded or anything like that on social, but there also will be a link in there to join our Slack group. So you can like, drop me a message or send me a link of something if you want to update stuff and, keep me posted, or you want to like have another sit down, like I'm more than happy to.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds great. Thank you.
All righty.
Being
Nice
with
to
me
meet you,
today.
Keanu. Have
Nice
a
to meet
good
you too.
one. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right.
You too. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.